get started. As always, we have our itinerary here. We're going to start with today's questions after a few short reminders that I didn't write on the board because I'm great. We have a class discussion. Today's discussion is on form. Hermit crabs, forms and stories can take that aren't traditional. Then we're going to go over syllabus, discussion led by Daniel. God user reviews, discussion led by Nate. We're going to have a pair activity, and then we're going to do our break in our workshops in the order of Justin, Madison, Ashland, David. Okay. The few small reminders / announcements for today. I did send an email out yesterday, I believe, about Thread, the undergrad journal for USF. You should all be submitting. Especially after you revise the short stories you should be submitting, you should be getting your work out there. I'm also passing around a small poster for USF's creative writing department. Many of you are non-majors, and that's great. I think there's a lot of value there. Creative writers don't have to study creative writing, but if you're interested in a minor or in the major, there is a lot of opportunity here. We do actually have a fantastic program. And of course, during the break, if any of you are interested in taking further creative writing classes, I can offer advice for registration that you might not get anywhere else because I know all the faculty, right? Something to think about. Okay, so today's big questions. What is form? Why do we do it? And how? Right? The questions come with a question mark. They don't exist in an abstract punctuationless space. Right? Okay. Someone tell me really briefly what form means in storytelling.
Skeleton.
What?
Skeleton.
Skeleton?
It's like the skeletal structure of a story or a piece of literature.
Okay, so skeletal structure. Good. I'm going to propose that an easier way to think about form in storytelling, or at least one easy way to think about form in storytelling, is as a hermit crab. You all know what a hermit crab looks like? Yeah. Just in case you don't, I'm going to try to draw a hermit crab. That's a hermit crab head. Well, it's got like little stop things, right? And then it's got four. Okay, it doesn't really matter what a hermit crab looks like when it's not in the shell. The big thing is it's got this. It's got this enormous shell. Are you critiquing my drawing? Look, it's perfect. No, haven't you ever seen this spiral shell? Okay. Anyway, so this is a hermit crab now, even though it doesn't look like one, right? Okay. The form of a story is the shell, right? Does that make sense? This is the form, is this shell. The hermit crab itself is the content, right? That's what we're getting out of the story as a whole, and then together they make this whole different thing, which is the function of the story, right? Form plus content equals function. For class today, we read a story in the form of a syllabus and a story in the form of an Amazon review of God, right? Both are great, I think. What are some other shapes stories could take? Okay, letter.
What do I call them? Epistolary?
Well, this is a really small shell. Okay, we're gonna run out of room. But okay, so a letter, epistolary. What else? Yes.
Post-it notes.
Post-it notes. Great.
That's the thing.
Post-its.
Thing I do it.
Okay.
Dissertation.
A dissertation. Perfect. Daniel.
Text messaging.
Texts. Sure.
Songs.
Songs.
Memoirs.
Memoirs. Okay, those are kind of, we're moving into like genres of story.
Verse.
What'd you say?
Verse.
Okay, verse, song, yeah.
When I think of verse, I'm thinking more on the poetry side.
Yeah. Shakespeare. Could a story take the shape of a receipt?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Ashland's story. Almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Like Ashland's story. David has a lot of notes and kind of things from this professor. right, not this professor, this experimenter in a horrible way in Morrowtown. But a lot of notes, letters not necessarily written to anyone, journal entries. The diary of Anne Frank is literally entirely about the form of a diary, right? What else?
Transcripts, like court transcripts.
Okay, court transcripts, interviews, right? Okay,
Graffiti.
graffiti, sure. Any number of forms could make a story, right? The only reason we write stories in a prose fashion where it's just words on words on words is because it's easiest, I think, based on the technology we have, and it's what we expect, right? But part of this course is breaking that expectation and questioning why we do things the way we do things, right? So my question to you then is why don't we always write in different forms?
Sometimes you become comfortable with one type of form, as do your readers.
Okay, yeah,
Well, some stories is easier to be told in prose than say in post-its. If you have like a saga of some sort, post-its probably would be a good way to try to convey that, because it might just be overwhelming.
okay, yeah. Yeah, so Post-its would totally fail to tell like an epic story, right? We have, yeah, sorry.
It's like that heat thing that we were talking about.
Okay,
Like, if
yeah.
you have a really complex story, it's better to tell it using, in simpler terms. Because
Okay,
it'll
yeah.
be conceptualized a lot easier if it's in a way that people are more comfortable with.
If you want to reach a broad audience, you need to bridge
Or
that.
any audience with some stories.
Right, right. It's hard to tell a very complicated story with a dissertation sometimes.
Yeah, like Game of Thrones could definitely not be told with Post-it notes. It needs to be told in the form of an awful historical novel.
Right, exactly. There is a level at which we're doing the exact same thing we did with Rick Moody's story, right? Does everyone remember Drawer? The one-sentence story or a three-sentence story, depending on who you are, right? We're looking at form here, right? This is form, right? In order for function to work, form and content have to work together, right? Does that make sense? You can't have an epic in Post-it notes. You can't have a letter from a dead person. You can't do a dissertation if your narrator is a 4-year-old, right? If that's the kind of story you want to tell. You could try. It might be interesting to have a dissertation from a 4-year-old, right? And I would invite you to write that story. But I think generally, form and content have to match in some way that makes sense. It's good to experiment with forms so long as you're thinking about the content that you're fitting into that form, right? You can write the receipt story, right? A grocery shopping list. You could write that story. But a grocery shopping list that's about a violent murder is going to be really weird and maybe difficult to pull off. Maybe it's the easiest thing in the world to pull off. Your mind's already reeling like, okay, you need a shovel, you need piano wire, something else, right? But you do have to be thinking about these things in coordination. We're going to get to the why after doing discussions of the stories today. I just want you thinking about, while we're talking about these stories, the different ways in which the what of these forms might be informing the content and how that function plays out. And we'll talk about, throughout these discussions, why it's working or why it's not working. We're starting with Daniel's discussion lead of syllabus. Does everyone have a copy? Fantastic. Okay. Jenny, whenever you're ready.
Howdy. How are y'all?
Good, Daniel.
They're all looking at me. My anxiety just went through the roof.
So what did y'all think of this?
I thought it was hilarious. It's honestly one of my favorite pieces we read so far.
I mean, I definitely like the existential darkness in it.
Kind
Like,
of depressing in a humorous way.
yeah, it's funny, but it's like dark funny. I like dark humor, so,
It's too real.
yeah. How many of you would actually take this class?
I feel like
Already
we're
taken.
taking
Yeah.
Would you willingly take it?
Probably not, that's terrible. It's like the darkest way that you could look at your life possible. You know, like some people are like, oh, I can't wait to grow up and get married. Yes, yeah, you have to get married to be miserable.
What doesn't fit?
Matilda.
Why is that?
Everything else is depressing.
Dude, Matilda is everything.
Matilda's very depressing. She like her parents hate her. Are we talking about like the little Matilda?
Yes, little girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she gets a wonderful mother at the end.
Yeah, but isn't,
Yeah, but she goes through like actual abuse, mental abuse, emotional abuse, then she comes out at the end a better person.
That is normal in this course.
It's like the lighter version of Carrie.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's, yeah,
Like Carrie Taylor, right?
because in the required textbooks, it literally has a Nietzsche book, and then it has Matilda.
I love that Elements in Style was also there.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many jokes that are written for an audience of writers or academics in this way. Elements in Style is a book required in so many classrooms.
I loved it.
I mean, I don't have to agree. I was sitting here reading it and going like, oh my god, this is so terrible. Why do I like this? And I love the fact that he mentions something, I forget where it was, but where he mentions something about, homosexual guys, and it's like, you guys do this, but then later on,
Top page 3.
not there.
Oh.
But then, that's where I'm getting to. Later on, when he's like, female students, you're required to do this, and you have to have at least one same-sex experiment. But then he goes to male students, and gay experiences are just gross.
Yeah, same-sex gay experiences because
Yeah.
two guys are making out is gross.
Yeah.
But it also speaks a lot to society's views on things, you know?
But yeah, it's like, ask any man who's not any man, I'm not saying that every straight man on the planet likes two girls making out. But ask a lot of guys out there, they're like, oh yeah, two girls making out's hot, and then you ask other people and they're like, ew, two guys together, that's gross. There's such a double standard, and I love the way that this author comes across with it in such a hysterical, like sarcastic way.
Yeah. There's a lot of satire of societal views in this piece, I think. It's not just a satire of academia, it's not just a satire of being young. It's just in general, like, this is the life we experience.
So is there anything you guys would steal from this?
The form, 100%. Because when he passed it out, I was like, did he change the syllabus? What happened? And then I started reading it, I was like, oh, what's happening?
Let's talk about the form. What's happening here?
It lends to the content, you know? It's a syllabus about how terrible your life is going to, or could possibly be.
And apart from the content, it actually makes things more syllabus.
Mhm.
They even have the cause and academic thesaurus and things.
Yeah. And the percentage.
Yeah, that's just something. I think it's funnier if you actually have taken classes with, and you know what a syllabus looks like. Otherwise, it's just, what, like a list.
Yeah.
Well, if you haven't taken a class of the syllabus, you're like, what does the word syllabus mean?
Why can't I learn that until middle school?
I also like that the classes, like students enrolled in this course should have previously passed SHT 101. Like that's supposed to mean shit, you know?
Definitely like a euphemism for like this shit. And it's always gonna be shit from 101 to 401 and on to 501.
Or it stands for sobbing heavily and terribly.
It still works.
Yeah.
It's got layers.
That's all my questions.
What else is happening with the form here?
Really bad leading discussions.
What else is happening with the form?
Well, like that has titles, and then underneath it, it has like, it says like work a series of ridiculous, humiliating, and unsatisfying jobs, and then underneath it, it has like other options, like what you would select underneath that. So like things that are impractical and things that are practical, and like that's different life choices that people can make. And different choices you can make in the syllabus or class. Hypothetical.
Could the story of this piece have been told in a different way?
Yeah, but it would have been sad. Like the fact that this is in the syllabus makes it funny, and it makes all of this misery like approachable.
Yeah.
Because it's formatted so nicely, and you can read it really easily.
This would have been a really melodramatic piece, I think.
Yeah.
It would have been dreadful to read.
They chose kind of the coldest way to write anything, which is in the form of an academic piece.
Adds a certain amount of irony.
Yeah.
Plus, most people generally just don't like reading syllabuses or syllabi, which one is it? I don't know.
Most people are stupid, so listen to
But
yourself.
it pushes the envelope of reality that it's still, it's absurd but in it as a whole, but it's still plausible. 'Cause it's strange, but
Yeah.
plausible.
What were we talking about last week? Oh, absurdism and magical. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we talked about how this form allows this subject to be really cold. Like if life is horrible is a 10 on the scale of like subject heat and temperature, then approaching it from a syllabus is a really cold way to do that. What kind of atmosphere does that create when you have something like a syllabus with life is pain on the other end of it?
I don't know about anybody else, but when I get a syllabus for a class, I read it, and then I kind of have a panic attack thinking to myself, good God, this class is gonna be so terrible, I'm gonna fail this. So I feel like it would kind of lend if you were, say, 20 years old, getting this syllabus, and you sit here and read through this, and you're just like, good God, is this gonna be my life for the next 10 years? The form kind of helps with that.
Okay, yeah. Naturally, looking at a syllabus, you feel a certain number of things, right? One of them is impending boredom, right? If you're about to be really bored reading this story, and I think maybe many of you were feeling that way, I'm about to be bored reading a story in the form of a syllabus, right? There's a certain level of surprise when it starts off. Students will engage in a variety of socially motivated assignments specifically designed to break them down into the desired format, namely a respectable, productive, totally miserable member of society, right? Nothing about the form here, nothing about how it's formatted suggests what the story is going to be about, and that's where the story comes from, is the juxtaposition of these two elements, right? It's not, I don't think it's an expected form. What do you all think? Would you have expected, if I told you there's a story about how miserable life is, when would you have hit syllabus on the list of types of story that could be Third, right, we're academics here, it's almost immediate, right. But I mean, that's something to think about. We just talked about how form and content have to come together to create some function. But it's not the same thing as saying you should make the expected choice, right? You know, if you're talking about like, oh, what kind of a person is my mother, an interview might be an expected choice, right? Or letters might be an expected choice. But if you had a shopping list, that would be really interesting. And so what happens between you choosing a shopping list and you choosing that for the content of, I want to do a biopic on my mother, is fascinating. And here the fascinating choice is, this is a syllabus about life being painful and awful. Right? So I want you to think about that. Like if you're experimenting with forms, you're not just doing it because it seems like, oh yeah, a letter would fit here, but oh, a letter would be really weird here, and that creates a different kind of reading experience. You'll see what I mean? Okay, so we've just talked about syllabus. I think that was a good discussion. Any final notes before we try to put Y on the board? Yes,
So the
David?
total percentage goes up to 105%, so I was just wondering, like, which part is the extra credit?
Which part is the extra credit?
Like, which part of the 5? Like, blame your parents and everything, there's a bunch of them, so That was the one thing that in my phone.
Right, some people miss that step, I think, right, yeah. Yeah. Possibly it's a mistake, this was probably made by a writer, not a math.
Well, it might be that you needed the extra 5%.
Yeah,
To pass.
yeah, interesting.
Maybe not committing suicide's an extra 5%. Like extra credit right there, you made it to the end of the course.
Good. Any other final comments? Okay, so what did we discover in our discussion today? Just now, with this piece, and then we'll move on to God user reviews and we'll add more to the board as well. Why do you use form? Someone tell me.
To give a certain tone to the story.
Okay, tone and voice, right? You approach things from an interesting way where you don't necessarily need to have a traditional narrator, a traditional story arc.
Lighten the mood.
Okay. Lighten the mood. Humor, going cold, right? How you talk about something changes based on the form you're using.
A little bit relatable as well, because as a syllabus, most of our student has been in a class where they have a syllabus, but didn't necessarily encountered all the aspects of it that this is touching on.
Right. If this is a 10-year period after turning 20, then some readers might not be there, right? And this engages with that in a way that might be accessible. What else do forms do from this piece?
They surprise you.
Okay, good. Yeah, surprising. And that's one of the most important things a story can do, right? We're reading for novelty constantly. Even if something is told in an old way, we want to see something interesting, I propose. And this is really interesting, right? I've never read a syllabus story before, this one. Final thoughts? Before we move on to God user reviews led by me. All right, perfect. Let's get started.
I looked up online to find out a little bit about Diane here. She, nothing really too drastic. She's grew up in Wisconsin with her family and currently lives out in LA and teaches out there at a smaller college, private school. And she's also Jewish, which I found very interesting. It's the first thing that she lists off is a bunch of names as to what the God is called by. And of them, especially speaking of her background, I'm seeing Hashem and Yahweh, which are traditional names used. But she doesn't touch on, I don't know if it's out of respect or because I don't know how much into her faith she is, but she doesn't touch on Adonai. She uses Hashem instead. And Hashem literally means the name for God. It just means the name instead of what is used in prayer. And she goes on and lists all these other names from different beliefs, including 4 from Hindu and a couple odds and ends, and then Christianity and obviously Islam with Allah to start with. And among all these, she really only touches on in the reviews the Christian and Judeo side. Do you think you can, anyone catch that or shows that in there? Why that might be?
I think he's just thinking of something that, you know, she would expect people to be more familiar with, or, I guess in America.
Maybe she's just looking at what, like you said, what she knows, and in the hopes of not offending, maybe?
Yeah, I kind of wondered that myself, because she, most of it doesn't, once she gets into the stories, don't really touch on which God they're choosing to speak about. We get some clues, but there's some fascinating points throughout here, including a rabbi who has an alternative synagogue where they even do Buddhist meditation as part of theirs, and vegan Shabbat meal. It's just so absurd in some of these aspects, but some of them are so real life stories looking at it that it does measure to awaitability. The one that actually caught my eye the most is the third from the last, the blessed, blessed, blessed. How the woman here is talking about her, all these bad things that have happened in her life, but somehow she's saying she's blessed throughout it. Whether that's, her mother and father dying in their 50s, which means they had to be on their own pretty darn quick after moving to the United States. And then their first child died at 4 months in the crib, and then further on, God took her husband last year, and so he's with the baby now. But this woman keeps such an upbeat throughout the piece, even though it seems not so much blessed, because it doesn't really harp on too many of the things that were blessings in their life. Did anyone else notice some similarities in that?
I liked the juxtaposition of the blessed, 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 immediately followed by God is dead. Like you said, she has this positive, upbeat outlook on okay, even though all this terrible stuff happened to me, I'm still blessed because I have all of these wonderful people in my life. And then immediately after that, it's Jacob Kleinfield talking about how he lost everyone, So she's got this very, upbeat, great outlook on God, even though all these terrible things have happened, and he's got this lack of belief and negative feel towards God because he has lost everything.
And again, that's something she would know from the Jewish background. I mean, that's, I'm sure, really brings home with her. That's one that probably brings true to probably part of her family that she has. And then, of course, right after that, we're following it up with so what now? We have a young teen, a real young teen, if I remember correctly, ran out of high school. That I don't remember reading 14, but getting that from another. But runs out and doesn't know what to do with her life at this point. She's out on her own and crying out to God. So there's kind of a wave throughout this piece that feels like, even though it's just written as user reviews.
Definitely sums up the many mixed emotions several people have about God. I mean, I grew up Baptist. I'm not a firm believer in God and everything because life experiences just kind of ruined all of that for me. So it definitely does a great job at summing up those emotions that different people often feel.
How else could a story do that?
I think if it took a different form, it again would be much darker.
Well, and you also start warning that it might be insulting people.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was one of my worries, actually, reading this, because I am a firm believer in God, but it plays to stories that are relatable to most of the audience, like you mentioned, but not in a way that is condescending to any such faith.
No, it offsets
Yeah.
this, right? We've all read reviews on the internet, but these ones are even kind of nice. Like even the guy who's waking up people of the 21st century, he doesn't explode on the page or anything.
I love the one with God, the hell is without Wi-Fi.
That actually fits in really well. People are obsessed with Wi-Fi now. I'm included in that.
Yeah, but
I appreciated that, because these aren't written like actual reviews, that the piece takes a flight of fancy there, and it's no, I'm gonna write these in a nice, polite way, and in a way that's kind of beautiful in parts, it's an insult to the memory of all those who perished with your name on their lips in the second to the last one.
yeah.
Or if I live to 100, how could I ever forget?
Diane Arias elevates the language at times. And I think that happens in the last lines too. Everyone here seems a lot older than me, but no one agrees about anything. It's kind of a commentary on the subject matter more than it is about reviews as a concept, right? The reviews are the method that this author uses to get to these different types of conversations about this subject. I mean, so I'll try to ask again, like, how else could this story be told? How could we get these 10 different people's perspectives? Interviews.
But that's kind of what this is.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. Do you think it would be as effective? What would it change? I guess effective is a weird word. What would it change?
Well, in an interview, the interviewer can kind of move the topic towards certain areas. So in there, you can get a little more uniformity, whereas these are stories that are all over the place.
I just feel like with any other type of form, it would just be way too long for all these people to have all these different types of opinions. We'd have to either get like more background for them to understand who it is, or get like a better explanation. Like with the review, it's kind of like very concise. It's like when you go to a restaurant, you don't really talk about like how the parking situation was, if the food was really good. So then you talk about the food more. And then
Also with an interview, you might be more prone to have about the same amount of segments. Whereas this, I mean, there can be just 1 or 2 lines even for some of the reviews. So it gives you a feel more realistic in that aspect.
I think it gives this author a lot of control, right? Which is kind of weird, because you would think you're committing yourself to a form that's not the traditional form, so you must be losing control, right? Because you're restricting yourself into this method of discussing something and of getting into this story. But what actually happens is this author takes this form and says, okay, what kind of stories can jump out of this? What can I do if I'm talking about God in user reviews? And the answer is I can give a shit ton, right, of different anecdotes, right? Different experiences, different perspectives on this issue. Is there as much humor here as there is in Solas?
Not as much, but I think there still is. Like payment options, check, money order, type, MasterCard, Visa, Discover, harvest offerings, annual sacrifice, PayPal.
Right.
I mean, it's humor, but I mean, part of this is actually part of those cultures, and especially the harvest offerings and animal sacrifices speak to the Jewish heritage.
It has a share of irony, but it feels more like it's making a point on perspectives, especially with religion.
I feel like there's a lot more humor just in the fact that like you'd never hear someone say this, like or have someone like review God, and just the idea of it to me is hilarious. It's like you're reviewing something that it's just it's just an interesting just concept as a whole, so it makes it all funny to me.
It's surprising again, right? Like, let's say you were trying to write a story about God. I don't know if I suggested, but let's say you were, and you wanted to talk about the pros of God and the cons of God. How would you do that if you had to stick to the traditional storytelling method?
Well, you first have to define what God you're coming from.
Sure.
Whereas this, you can lump it all together and then let it play out as to how each of the reviewers see it.
Yeah. If traditional storytelling is focal characters, 1 or 2 characters by which we identify the way we're seeing the entire story, then I think it would be impossible to get a perspective like Matrix 78's perspective, right? I have mixed feelings about God in this type of package. Can characters in traditional fiction have a paragraph like Matrix 78 has to just talk?
Some stories do have a point where it switches point of view between characters.
Right. Could we get, but in this type of space, could we get these paragraphs like this, where a character just says to us, this is what I think about God? No. In a way that would be compelling. You can do anything you want, right? But I don't know that we could have our characters just running around giving monologues about God. Maybe, probably not in the 21st century. But this author kind of gets around that, right? She says, well, I kind of like monologues. I'm a Shakespeare fan. We're going to talk about God. User reviews. That's the way I'm going to do it. People blabber on in these reviews, and it's going to be funny here. but it's gonna get to the core of this discussion. Do you have any other discussion questions for us, Ian?
No, that's about the extent.
What would anyone steal from this story?
I really like the grading,
Mhm.
that was really cool and relatable.
There's a term in the back, Magic Sky Daddy. I really like that term.
Kind of take the book out of like no exit and use the no Wi-Fi as the premise. That's what hell is, that all these people get sent in.
Yeah.
Based on this generation's obsession with that would not surprise me.
I think I would go with the thing I mentioned Trent earlier about the piece using language that's a bit too flowery for the context. Because that isn't something that bothered me as I was reading it, it just felt like something that added to it.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Don't think of forms as restrictions, I think is kind of the point of today's lessons. Like, we're using form for specific reasons. Sometimes it's to be glib about things that are really dark, like life is pain, right? We can have a laugh at that. Sometimes it's to get to something that would be really melodramatic and reduce it using this kind of technique. Talking about big ideas in functions that are relatable, right? I think we're doing all of that in these two pieces, right? This is a story about whether or not God is good, right? And it's 3 pages. What the hell, right? You can't really do that. James Joyce took forever to do that, and it's kind of miserable to get through Dubliners, right? It's kind of miserable to talk about God in that way. But using this form, which doesn't restrict this author, Sonny's right, the language is elevated. There's not spelling mistakes, unless they're very intentional. There's not a ton of exclamation points, unless they're very intentional. There probably would be, but we don't need that for this form to still make sense, because all we need is what it looks like. All we need is what it visually looks like on the page. So we've got the what is form, right? It's the hermit crab shell, right? It's what we take our story and put it into. We've got the why form. How do we use form? How does this process happen?
Like how you start writing a story with it?
How do you start writing a story in which you engage with form?
You start with an idea about how to structure your story as opposed to what you say.
Okay. Good. It can be a good idea. This isn't true for everything. You can start the opposite way too. But I think it can be fun to say, let's start with the form. Take one of these ideas. Okay, I'm going to write a story based on text messages, right? I have no idea what that story is. But already saying a story is going to come out of text messages now invites the type of storytelling you might do, right? And there might be something expected, like I'm going to have a young couple arguing about their relationship in text messages. Okay, maybe. Maybe we keep pushing it. What about I'm texting my boss, right? And my boss is going to fire me. And I can tell because of these text messages, but there's a lot of emoticons in the text messages that I know are aggressive towards me, right? We start adding terms, right? What does a text message invite? It invites emoticon use, right? It invites timestamps, right? That's something you couldn't have in fiction. You could say, he paused and didn't speak for a few minutes, but that would be weird, right? But if you have a text message, you can say 11:53 and then 12:07 is the next response, and we're wondering what happened in that 14 minutes, right? So there's a ton of stuff that just starts coming out because we started with this form, right? any number of conflicts, tensions, yearnings can come through because we're thinking about where stories come from. So, I want you to pick a partner, or have a partner assigned to you, but probably you'll want to pick a partner. Have you picked your partners? Okay, if not, you'll find them probably. Okay, so one person in your pair is going to come up with the basics of the story. I'll write down the basics of the story just in case you don't remember. Basics of the story: character, conflict, yearning for this character, right? You know, the object of desire, world pushes back, etc. We've been talking about this all semester. One person in the pair comes up with the story we're going to tell. The second person is going to come up with a form. Any of these forms, anything else you can think of that a story might come out of. You're going to get together and you're going to co-write the story using these elements. You're going to discuss for 5-10 minutes how these elements might fit together, what elements of the story might change, what the form might inspire in the story and bring about that you might be able to use, and then you're going to kind of come up with a brainstorm of ideas within that story to present to the class, and we're going to ask questions of you, and it's going to be a fun time. Okay. Does everyone have a partner? Great. So decide amongst yourselves which of you is coming up with story elements, which of you is picking the form. Okay, please get started.
What I'm thankful for
Well, here we'll be back. Yeah, but I think right now you have the opportunity to pick whichever proposal you want.
Alright, basically hands are really good, like I'm thankful for family, friends, food, how old they are, right? So his girlfriend has freedom, actually, when I say it a lot,
I wrote it down, we're walking out of
Are there any other thoughts? What are the, are they just kind of like?
This form is the hand turkey.
Because I would think if he's in love with somebody that is so like connected with high school to him, he would never want to leave high school. So maybe he's like, the guy goes back and he's 18, but he's like still like not even a senior in high school. He's a junior in high school at 18. Basically, yeah. It's like his parents found out and she didn't end up going to jail. What if she didn't?
It's a really 21st century millennial. We're in millennial right now.
Adam, what's a partner together for the academy? He's going to tell you about it.
We can say a story.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to be, that's, you know, like.
Fun, right?
Grandmother forgot her. And she tries to get her bed back. It's like she's going out to
Usually, yeah. There's always
Because like, it's a court document, somebody, or she essay, like, teaching language.
What if it's just like a
Is this called?
What kind of stuff?
Yeah, like, to.
And feel free to both be writing it down. And come up with ideas and brainstorm with each other.
I think it would be more than one essay, it'd be like one page exercise. And then she assigns a college entrance exam. And it's just them talking about, so the first one, I want maybe to be like, when they're together. The second one, because it's gotta be 3, right? It's all works. The second one would be like, oh, the first one would get out on them, and just totally misread it.
Brainstorm.
Yeah, and the second one is be like, oh, that's why he got hung back. And then the last one is and then, dude, you totally fucking devastated.
We have our members of the
Check out my YouTube vids.
Yeah.
I have seen
Oh, and you know, actually the middle one, I think having it be like a very thing that she's not reading, we're kind of personalize it. Maybe it should be like, he mentions that it's like running.
But also like, what if
Well, there's that side, but there's.
Oh, Lolita. Harold Motto. Oh, dude, I watched that when I was like 12. I was really it was her, yeah, she grabbed the
great value, cranberry sauce.
or it could be you start out like you I'm working my way out.
No, there's nothing that like is.
Would it be like a normal, give the most score?
Ability for anything.
That feels like
My whole idea is like the bad stuff.
No, it's
And then like the little section on it, like
And like,
Okay, so if your form involves a visual element, I give you full control to be able to start drawing that right now for your presentation. I'll give you another 5 minutes. So at 7:27, you're gonna be presenting to each other, not standing up in front of the class, just saying out loud what you're doing. And we're gonna talk about it, okay? So feel free to continue brainstorming and seeing what kind of stories can come out of this.
good like French last name. I want her to have a name that's like, cause she's got it, right?
Whatever, we're good.
Belgar.
Kids are actually,
Like 1 hour. Belgar.
I know, but it's like such a, like, there's so much to it and
Like it
stuff.
just seems like a regular last name. I'll try to do this. Oh, yeah. But like, or like, yeah.
I think it's just like I can pick a hero, and you like to build on your but I don't think about it in that regard. How much of the story do you need to tell?
I'm thinking it's like freshman year, like, this kid should be taught. Oh, the second one. She has I know.
It could be a deck. Building up a deck.
What are you guys looking at right now?
I was thinking, you were like, yeah, why did you call me? It's so
So it starts
but it'll give you
Oh, junior.
it's about an author,
Yes.
Okay, cool.
and he has car accidents. And then it's like,
And she kept asking questions, and he's kind of like, yeah, it's all fine.
Well, no, it's not like.
What's your favorite?
Right, exactly, it goes against the order.
Yeah, I prefer talking to you.
It leads us to think this is what kind of story.
One of the things she does to keep
Happy, that's cool. Great
Take a log and put it in between your toes.
Why bother?
No, I was just saying like.
Yeah, exactly. And she's telling
Right now. I'm like 6 hours in my head. And you start tomorrow, it's going on. That's the only way. It's not very good.
You have 30 seconds to come up with a title.
I like the parts of it. I'm writing the like I started it because I thought they were hilarious, right? I was in comedy college for 4 years. That's funny. It's in a third person with
Covering your sanity.
covering your sanity. But it's about
Okay,
traffic tuning.
so we're gonna go around the room, starting with David and Stephanie, and going clockwise around the room. Please just tell us what your form is, what kind of stories you found could come out of it, and just tell us your title so we think it's exciting.
Okay, the title?
Sure. The title is Dear Sweet Fetus Jesus.
Dear sweet fetus Jesus.
And then
Already
the
excited.
story is in the form of a prayer. It's about a granddad and he's sitting at the Thanksgiving table with the whole family and he kind of hates his son because he's a huge disappointment. So as he's like thanking God for sweetest Jesus for all of the great things in life, he starts in like on a rant about his son and calls him out in front of the whole family.
Perfect. Story comes out of a Thanksgiving prayer. David, you were
And
saying?
like it starts out because he brought great value cranberry from Walmart.
When everybody
When
else
everyone had like
home
homemade.
cooked stuff.
Oh, how dare he.
Very indeed.
Conflict and yearning. Like you kind of still want to eat it. Okay, good. Ashley.
Okay.
Jessica.
Yeah, the title is #Monkeys Day Out, because, but the form is Twitter, so that's why. And it's about a grandma who's taking her monkeys to the vet, and he escapes, gets on a bus, and then like, it just loose all over the city. And she has to use, social media to track him and find out where he's at.
This sounds like you're in a story.
Can I make a suggestion? You should make it like set in the same universe as Baby's Day Out.
The There's like one
Maybe
tweet about a baby,
everything.
yeah, good.
What's this baby doing with the monkey?
And I wonder too if you could have tweets that are totally unrelated and like other stories could come into it.
Oh, I'm sure,
Yeah.
And like pictures can come in too, like, you know, like a blurry photo of a monkey, like, whoa, look what I just saw, you know, on 56th Street. Like, so you can do images and stuff as well.
And then the opposite, like people start realizing she's looking for this monkey, so they kind of like troll her a little bit. And they're like, oh yeah, I totally saw a monkey, and it's like a clearly photoshopped monkey on some. Yeah, that'd be interesting, yeah. All right, Carolyn, Adam, what you doing?
We had a rule book for a completely fictional board game.
It's called When Powers Collide. And the idea behind it being, it's just like a normal superhero game that they bought from the store, but it's supposed to be about like these two kids, how they modify the game based around their own lives, and just how it changes, or how it has changed over the years. Okay. Being friends.
Very cool. Very cool.
Including process from her names, agreement characters, and a different setting.
Yeah, it's like, takes place in the city of Heroville, and they cross out for Pittsburgh.
What other kinds of stories could come out of a rule book or a board game?
Well, what makes me think I know it's not the same like Jumanji or the Z one? Zathura, thank you.
It'd be good for like a dystopia, just the list of laws.
Yeah, list of laws, and then maybe you realize, and this is like the kind of twist that's okay, right? At the end, it's just a board game, but you were like really sure that this world could exist.
I like the name of it is like Modern America.
You gotta follow the instruction manual.
Yeah, you gotta follow the instruction manual. Good, good. All kinds of stories could come out of
I
that.
did have one idea that was like trying to become president.
Trying to become president.
Yeah. And there's like 538 electoral vote cards.
Oh my god.
Yeah, right?
That's the worst thing I've ever heard.
Say that now.
It's like an 18-month game.
And like no matter who wins, the audience loses.
Good. Nate, Victoria, what did you come up with?
We came up, the story's name is Recovering Meds for Dummies. It's an instruction manual for an old maid who accidentally gave her meds to some trick-or-treaters.
Oh no.
That's hilarious.
And she has to go through, we thought there was all kinds
Story
of,
about a creepy clown.
they could, I mean, you could have it, well, the kids have a parent with them, then you have to do this. Oh, if the parents react this way, or if the kids run away, you can react this way. And all the time, well, if your memory fails, look back on step 2 or whatever.
Right.
Yeah,
To
if
refresh
a-
your memory.
If a kid ate a piece and says that he doesn't feel so good and he's swelling up or something, then what do you do? Step by step.
And it's all kinds of different things that could happen.
And then depending on what med it is, it can be affecting both the old maid or the kids that had taken it. Or what if, because she hadn't had her meds for a while, maybe it wasn't the kid that took it, maybe she accidentally gave it to a dog, but she took it.
Yeah, at this point, it'll probably be delusional to start reaching down your dog's throat. Don't do that. Exactly. Perfect, yeah, exactly. So many kinds of stories could come out of that, absolutely. All right, Eric, Jace, where are you?
So we did a Venn diagram. Do I need to show the Venn diagram?
You can show the Venn diagram.
It's a Venn diagram. The title was The Trials and Tribulations of a Career Path. So we did like being a writer versus being a lawyer, and then like the middle is like things that they have in common. I can read some of them. So if you were going to be a writer, you could love to do it. You could be famous. There's not much money in it though. You don't have to go to an office. You can get awards. If you're gonna be a lawyer, your parents want this, probably like the family business. You get more income, but it's a 9-to-5 job. And then like the things they have in common would be like good at lying. They both deal with stories and they change people's lives.
One more thing they have in common, high suicide rates.
All right, true.
Good and dark, yeah. All right, perfect, yeah. Excellent. All right, where are we, Sunny and Jaren?
You wanna start and then I'll just jump in and interrupt you?
Yeah, what do we decide on the title?
Yeah, the title isn't really the good part about our story. It's Junior Year Portfolio 2002-2003.
Okay, yeah.
So, characters are a young man.
Like, gets older over the course of the story, but starts out like 14, 15, and by the end he's like 18.
And older teacher, his teacher, who starts out, I guess, at like 43 or 44, and
Mhm.
ends up 46.
Ends up the same, doesn't matter.
And they do the deed, freshman year for him, and he falls in love. And the story is written
In the form of essays that he's writing for her, and then the grades that she like marks on the paper. Like, A+, you did a great job on this analysis of any movie with statutory rape. Or like, and then the second one would be what he did last summer, and he had to go through therapy. And he ends up missing a year of school. And then, of course, the last essay is like, it's his like college entrance essay, and it's him talking about why he never wants to leave high school, because like, he's like permanently connected due to this trauma that he suffered. And like, the teacher's note on that one is just like, leave me alone, stay away from my family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it gets dark, but like, you're doing something that I think is what's really great about Syllabus too, right? Is the author of Syllabus is a teacher, was a student, interacts with syllabuses, depends which form it comes from, I'm not sure. But interacts with these documents all the time. But stories aren't written in that form, and why? And so you're gonna write stories in the form of essays with teacher annotations, which you get all the time, right? You're college students, you get that all the time, you took Comp 1, right? I'm gonna say, okay, that's where the story is now. And using it, good, good, that's what this whole thing is about. Okay. Where are we, Justin?
Our title is Catastrophe. It's
Catastrophe.
Yeah.
You guys aren't pussyfooting around with that title.
It's like, it's a YouTube, it's comments on a YouTube video. It's like, the first one is about a cat playing piano. And that's two people commenting on their serious person and a YouTube troll. And the serious person's all like, talking about how the cat's obviously not playing it, and the troll's of course trolling.
Oh, I'm sure it is playing.
Yeah, so they're like commenting back and forth, arguing, and when the serious person's like, he's not playing it right, you should check out my videos, like I know how to play, and then the troll goes and comments on all of his videos, doing troll-like things, and then eventually the troll starts to piss him off really badly to the point where he gets really angry, and the troll tells him to kill himself, and he stops responding.
Yikes.
Good. We have like a dark corner of the room.
Well,
you could have that is a friend in the other room, who's the troll, and it wasn't until he got up and says, "Look at this guy that."
And the comments are coming from inside the house.
Right, thank you, Jordan, thank you, Justin. Good. Madison, Daniel, where are we?
We totally ripped off the class discussion. We went text messages. And I guess you would say the title, but it's what the wife has this guy saved in her phone as is hired ass. And then the text conversation goes, it's done, 10:30 p.m. Good, you'll get your money tomorrow, 10:32 p.m. 11:45 p.m. What the hell, he just walked in the door. I thought he was dead. 11:45 p.m. You met John from the building on 45th and 3rd, right? 11:46 p.m. No, he works at 54th and 3rd. 11:46 p.m. Daniel Johnson, right? 11:47 p.m. No, Daniel Johnston. Talking about a wife who has hired an assassin, but she doesn't know how to spell assassin, to kill her husband who killed the wrong guy. In here.
Very dark humor.
Good, good. And it's,
People in this room.
I really think hired ass is like a great title. Yeah, good, good. All right, David, Stephanie, where are we?
Yeah.
Oh my God. We did it. We
Yeah.
went all the way around the class.
Yes.
Yay, congratulations. So in this process, we looked at a ton of forums, right? We looked at texts again, right? We did Thanksgiving prayer, we did Twitter, board game rule books, 4 dummy manuals, YouTube comments, essays with notes from a teacher, Venn diagrams, right? How often do you read stories in these forms? Almost never. But people are eager for them, right? People are really interested in these things, and they publish them. Because no one's writing them. Why? I don't know, something to think about. Stories come out of forums a lot, and it's worth looking into. People are publishing these kind of documents, and I just want to point out a few very popular books that are doing exactly this that we've been talking about. Rant by Chuck Palahniuk, I think that's how you say that name, is a book entirely in interviews. Those of you familiar with Don Quixote, it's very much the same style, right? It's maybe 10, 15 different characters talking about one guy. You kind of learn through the series of this 400-page series of interviews who this guy is. Very interesting. World War Z, some of you may be familiar with the movie. It's nothing like the book. The book is a series of interviews with different survivors of the zombie apocalypse, right? This is how it was during the first days. This is how we got where we are. All these different characters talking about the same topic in a way that you wouldn't be able to if you had a traditional narrator, right? It's a series of interviews. S by Doug Durst and J.J. Abrams. Yes, that J.J. Abrams. We might have talked about before in this class. It is an 18th century novel, fictional, written by Doug Durst, with annotations from 2 grad students, well, 1 grad student and an undergrad, but about the book, trying to analyze it for this grad student's dissertation. Seems like it would be a boring topic. Turns out they fall in love by annotating back and forth. It's kind of cute. Yeah. S. You would never be able to do that, though, if you had to tell a traditional narrative. You're like, and then she put the book back on the bookshelf so that he could pick it up later, right? That's why? No, instead, they're just talking to each other directly in the margins of the book, right? It's an amazing looking book. I'm actually going to bring it to class next week for our visual resources talk, visual text interactions, so you can take a look at it there if you like. And then Carrie, someone mentioned earlier, by Stephen King. And I point this one out. Chuck Palahniuk is kind of like a popular author. I mean, you all know Fight Club, of course. Stephen King is like the person you think of when you think of like successful author, I think. Carrie is written in all kinds of different artifacts, right? There's newspaper articles, magazine articles, clippings, interviews, all kinds of different artifacts, different forms used in the book to tell the story, right? And then there's some narrative that goes along with it. But I'm just saying, like, you can do this, and people do it, and it's very successful, right? And it's because when you use form, you can engage with tone and voice in different ways. You can lighten the humor, go cold on subjects that might be too hot otherwise. You can engage with relatability in a way that's really interesting. And you can engage in storytelling in a way that feels more real, right? All of these methods of storytelling feel more accessible to us because it's not just words on a page, right? The only time you see words on a page in this format is to read a story. But if you're reading Twitter comments, like, that doesn't mean you're looking for a story, but one can emerge anyway. Do you see how that works? Okay, good. Let's break for 15 minutes.
Yeah.